Nigel, Lynn and Jack, you've seen quite a few cycles in your time. I think backstage Nigel was pointing out to me it could be something like almost 150 years worth of experience here before you, which is fantastic for me. It makes me feel very young. And I wanted to ask you if, with all that experience, and particularly, Lynn, you were talking about 52 years, is this cycle that we're seeing now any different from the past?
No, the cycle's the same as every other cycle, except the only difference that I see at the moment is the volume of money seems much larger. But
Nigel, what do you think?
Look, I totally agree with Lynn, but I'd also add that what is slightly different this time is that the money's coming from so many different areas. In the past, it was generally from Japan at one stage, or from the United Kingdom, or the United States, or Singapore, or Korea, but now it seems to be coming mainly from China, but all over the world.
Jack?
I agree with that. It is the same shape, but the volume of money is much larger, and it's globally spread, the sources of it. And the amount of money that's building up in the Asian region is going to make a huge impact on markets everywhere in the world, because some of them are now getting into real estate, whereas in the past they haven't.
Yeah. So, Jack, where do you think we are in the cycle then? Are we getting towards the top? You know, there's this talk of bubbles starting to happen everywhere, residential, commercial.
Well, the interesting thing is that things can happen really quickly for some extraordinarily unpredictable reasons. And there's a fair bit of heat in the market, but you just need a political switch to be turned in an important part of the world, and you can have a substantial effect on Australian real estate and other markets surprisingly fast.
Say we go to the residential market for a moment. Do you think there's any sort of feeling of a bubble there yet?
Well, that's the big debate at the moment, and in the part of the world that I live in, there's a fair amount of heat in the eastern part of Sydney. A fair amount of heat.
So will you be selling your house anytime soon?
Well, I've got a problem if I want to pick up on the Chinese interest in real estate in my part of the world. My street number is number 44. And anybody that's got a bright idea as to how I can deal with that problem, I'd be very grateful to hear it afterwards.
Yeah, you need number 88. And Lynn, you know, you've had experience with America. We seem to see a lot of the economists, I mean, it seems to be particularly American economists saying that the housing market in Australia will crash, and they've been doing that, by my count, for at least 5 years. Is there a reason why that we keep seeing that? I mean, I understand that the Reserve Bank is also saying there's heat in the market, and we all see it, but no one here seems to talk about 50% falls the way some of the overseas economists do.
I think we all judge our markets by our own experiences. And the Americans have a situation where in most states of America they don't have a mortgage as we have, and you can hand the keys to your property back to your lender if you don't want to pay it. And so they take their judgment from that. In Australia, our experience has been, or my experience has been, that the people will do almost anything. They'll take 3 jobs, they'll do almost anything rather than default. We don't have a lot of defaults in Australia, and I think that this difference that the experts keep saying this bubble's about to burst. I've got to tell you, in Sydney real estate, unless they stop migration, I think we've still got a ways to go as yet. There is a shortage of supply. I agree with Peter Costello yesterday.
And Nigel, you see a lot of the Gold Coast these days, given your role with the Commonwealth Games Corporation. Is that market starting to bounce back? Because if anywhere has fallen 40%, it's been there.
That's right. I mean, the Gold Coast was definitely one of the worst affected cities in the whole of the country in the GFC. But look, my experience is that values have picked up. There's nothing like a bubble looming. I see population growth driving continued prosperity for the residential sector, and I think it'll get better yet, and there's a lot more upside.
I mean, we've all written a lot about affordability as an issue, and obviously that is a problem. But there's also some thought there about Gen Y and Generation Y, and are they just a mob of whingers? So did you spoil your children and grandchildren? Did you create unrealistic expectations?
Look, I think we did. I think we're all guilty of that. The children leaving home want a bigger house. They want all the furniture from day one. It wasn't that way for us. We certainly, from a personal point of view, lived in a house that was nothing like what we have today. And, it was $12,000. But times change. But no, I think our expectations are too high today, and we have spoiled our children and expect to move into nice properties of almost the same standard with a television in 2 or 3 of the rooms, and that's not what we had.
So, Lynn, do you think that means we've got a generation of renters then, if they won't accept buying a house out in the suburbs that may not be to their standard?
I don't think motivation for owning property has changed at all. I think that what's interesting to me is the migration we have coming into this country, which is one of the great things about Australia. We're a great country of migrants, is how quickly people from countries where they don't normally own houses want to buy houses. My experience has been that I've seen people go to extraordinary lengths to be able to buy houses and maintain houses. I, like Nigel, did spoil my children, and I'm guilty of that. But I don't think it's taken away the basic motivation, which is people will go to enormous lengths to own a house in the area they want to own the house in. They'll work 3 jobs. They'll borrow from all their neighbours and all their relations, and they'll get there. And I can't see that changing.
Are you talking about Australians or perhaps more?
Australians and people who come to this country and become Australians, they very quickly seem to want to own a piece of Australia.
I mean, because obviously foreign investment in both residential and commercial has been top of mind as well. In the residential market, we've had some comments saying that to cool it down, should we have something like a separate stamp duty or a higher stamp duty impost for foreign buyers of residential property? Jack, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm not attracted to that idea. I like to think that over a reasonable amount of time, the market will generate the amount of supply that's needed to cope with the substantial pockets of demand that come out of other countries. I mean, we want to sell ourselves as a great place for overseas people to be educated, and with that, you bring another slab of demand from parents wanting to buy an asset here for a kid, and it's not a bad investment for the long term after the kid's finished using it and so on. So, I wouldn't want to discourage that, but I think you need to find other ways of making sure demand and supply are in a reasonable balance.
And Lynn, you've been a really long-term developer, and we talk about demand and supply. Are there some pockets of oversupply in the apartment market? Melbourne's been marked out in parts of Sydney.
Yeah, I must say I wouldn't want to be long on apartments in Melbourne at the present time. However, I'm very bullish on Sydney residential. I think that it's got a ways to go as yet.
Is that one of the opportunities in the market then for developers? Is there still... I mean, perhaps we can start with Nigel, and perhaps you guys can pick where you think the areas of opportunity are in the property market at the moment.
Well, look, I think the money will continue to flow in. And just going back to your earlier question about foreign investment, I think we should do everything we can to encourage it. People can come and invest here. They can't take the property away. So we should make it as easy as possible for that. In terms of growth, well, obviously I'm very biased. I love Queensland, and I think that if you look at our forecast for population growth and growth in the economy generally, they're very sound, and I think there's huge opportunities and huge growth all the way along the Queensland coastline, but particularly in Brisbane and the southeast corner.
Commercial or residential?
Right across the board. I mean, sure, we've got a lot of oversupply of office space at the moment, unprecedented levels, but that will change over time as the employment picks up and population growth continues.
Lynn, have you got a view?
Yes, I think the real opportunity that I see out there right now is for the asset creators. We are short of commercial grade assets. If somebody is a good asset creator, they're going to make fabulous, fabulous fortunes and make it relatively quickly. Anybody who can put a tenant with a piece of land, there is all this money out there. All the A-REITs will finance them through. It is a wonderful opportunity. I wish I was 30 years younger.
And Jack?
Oh, well, I agree with that. I'd like to be 40 years younger, but anyway, I'd have to agree with that sentiment. I think matching to needs is where success in the real estate business has always been, and watching where the community's going and where the interest areas are, and then finding a way of producing an asset to meet that is terrific.
Yeah.
And that's I think another area, just to go at a tangent for a moment, is the community's got a great need for cultural facilities. And the government never seems to have enough money for that. But it's not beyond the wit of the real property industry to find a property play that can generate a cultural asset in a way that's a win-win for the community. And the property investor. And the recital hall in Sydney was a good example in my time of how we paid for a recital hall and the government gave us additional planning support, and we've got a wonderful facility. And there's others like that that are, I think, a good model for the future.